While the world was watching missiles fly across the Middle East, something else was happening inside the White House. Not strategy, not deep analysis, not hard questions about escalation, retaliation, and what comes next. According to reporting from NBC News, the President of the United States was being shown a daily 2-minute highlight reel of the war, a montage. The biggest strikes, the cleanest hits, the most dramatic explosions. One official described it as clips of a stuff blowing up. And if that reporting is true, then this is not just a bizarre detail. It is the story. Because wars are not won through montages, they are not understood through montages, and they are definitely not controlled through montages. And that is where this gets dangerous. This story is not really about video. It is about power. It is about information. It is about what happens when the most powerful office in the world starts mistaking presentation for reality. Because once that happens, the question is no longer whether a leader looks strong on camera. The question becomes whether he understands the battlefield he is commanding. That matters now more than ever. Here's the setup. The United States is deep in a war with Iran. The White House says the operation is succeeding. The Pentagon says major objectives are being met. Trump keeps publicly insisting over and over that America has already won. Not that it is winning, not that it has momentum, that it has momentum, that it has won. Past tense, done, finished. Case closed, but here's the problem. When a leader keeps declaring victory while the conflict is still spreading, that is not confidence. That can be a warning sign, a serious one. And the real danger is not just that Trump is optimistic. Presidents are allowed to be optimistic. The danger is that the information system around him may be built to flatter his instincts instead of challenge them. NBC reported that the war briefings shown to Trump focus on the biggest and most successful strikes, and that some of his own allies worry he may not be receiving or absorbing the complete picture of the conflict. That is the key phrase here, the complete picture. Because in war, the missing part of the picture is usually the part that kills you. And this is where things shift. If this were a one-off story, maybe you shrug and move on. Maybe you say, fine, every president gets visual summaries. Every administration simplifies information. Every war room has optics, but this is not happening in a vacuum. Trump has a long political history of consuming information in ways that are intensely visual, intensely personalized, and often highly resistant to complexity. That pattern matters because the current war is not simple. It is not a branding exercise. It is not a campaign rally. And it is not a cable segment where the loudest line wins. This is the presidency under stress. This is decision-making under pressure. This is where reality has a vote. And reality is messy. According to NBC reporting, the curated videos are not Trump's only source of information. He also speaks with advisors, intelligence officials, foreign leaders, and sees media coverage. That matters. We should be fair about that. But the same report says the videos emphasize U.S. victories, and officials worry that they may be shaping his understanding of the war more than they should. NBC also reported that Trump was not briefed about damage to U.S. refueling planes in Saudi Arabia and instead learned about it through media reports. Think about that for a second. The commander-in-chief learning key battlefield information from the news, not from the chain of command. From the news. That is not normal, and it gets worse, because the public contradiction came fast. Trump publicly claimed that Iran's retaliation against Gulf countries came as a shock. He said, nobody expected that. We were shocked. That line would be remarkable on its own. But Reuters then reported that Trump had in fact been warned that attacking Iran could trigger retaliation against U.S. Gulf allies, and that such a response was already among the potential outcomes assessed before the strikes. Now, stop there. That is the whole issue in one frame. On one side, the president says no one saw it coming. On the other side, reporting says the risk was known in advance. So what are the possibilities? Either the warning was delivered and ignored, or it was delivered and not absorbed. Or the information flow was so distorted that the president emerged with a dramatically simplified version of reality. None of those options are comforting. And this is why a montage story matters so much. Because it is not really about whether Trump watches videos. Plenty of leaders use visuals. It is about what kind of visuals, what they emphasize, what they leave out. and whether the system is designed to inform the president or manage the president. Those are two very different things. To inform a president is to give him the best case, the worst case, the likely case, and the ugly case. To manage a president is to package reality in a form that keeps him calm, interested, or emotionally aligned with the story his team wants him to believe. That's a huge difference. And in war, it can become fatal. But the deeper story is even more revealing. NBC reported that Trump has grown frustrated with news coverage because the media is not reflecting the same successful picture he sees in these videos. That tells you something important. The president may not simply be receiving information. He may be comparing two realities, the reality in the montage and the reality outside the montage. And instead of asking whether the montage is incomplete, the instinct appears to be asking why the media won't match it. That is a classic power trip. When leaders start trusting the curated version more than the contested version, they stop using criticism as a check. They start treating it as sabotage. They stop asking, what am I missing? And start asking, why won't everyone else get on my page? That doesn't produce clarity. It produces delusion. And once delusion enters the war room, every next move becomes riskier. Because a war is not just about offensive success. It is about second-order effects. Retaliation, regional spillover, alliances, energy markets, shipping lanes, domestic support, military readiness, and political legitimacy, exit strategy. That last one matters most. Exit strategy, because nothing in this story suggests a clear one, and now even Republicans are signaling. After a classified Pentagon briefing, House Armed Services Committee Chair Mike Rogers said lawmakers wanted to know more about what was happening, what the options were, and why they were being considered, and that they were just not getting enough answers. Senate Armed Services Chair Roger Wicker did not exactly slam the administration, but when asked about Rogers' criticism, he said he could see why he might have said that. Nancy Mace went even further, saying she would not support troops on the ground in Iran, especially after the briefing, and warning that the justifications given to the public did not match the military objectives. Lawmakers were told privately, that is not noise. That is the sound of support weakening inside the president's own lane. And this is where the political part becomes impossible to ignore. For years, Trump's brand has been built on one central promise: strength. Not thoughtful strength, not disciplined strength, but visible strength, dominance. Momentum, a posture of control. In politics, that style can work. In media, it often works brilliantly. In war, it can become a trap if it makes escalation look easier than restraint. Because the image of war and the burden of war are not the same thing. The image is simple. Burden is not. The image is explosions, flags, fighter jets, declarations of victory. The burden is body bags, damaged alliances, fuel shocks, congressional anger, military overstretch, and the simple fact that enemies react. That last part appears to have been badly underestimated in public. And maybe that is the most revealing contradiction of all. This administration has projected absolute certainty in tone, but beneath that certainty, the public picture looks chaotic. Trump says the war is won. Meanwhile, Congress wants to know the plan. Trump says nobody expected Iranian retaliation. Reuters reports he was warned. The White House says the operation is close to its core objectives. Yet lawmakers leave briefings saying they are getting talking points instead of answers. That is not a communications problem. That is a governing problem. But here's where supporters push back. They would say, hold on, the operation has hit thousands of targets. The Pentagon says progress is real. The president is still consulting advisors. The media has every incentive to portray him as reckless. And during wartime, leaders cannot be buried under endless data. They need actionable summaries, not academic seminars. That argument is not crazy. In fact, part of it is true. A president does need distilled information. He cannot watch every development in real time. He cannot personally absorb every strike report. He needs structure. He needs filtering. He needs prioritization. But here's the problem with that defense. Filtering is supposed to sharpen judgment, not replace it. Summaries are supposed to compress complexity, not erase it. And if the filtered version keeps overstating success while understating risk, then the briefing process is no longer serving the presidency. It is serving the president's mood. That is a very dangerous shift. Because once a system is optimized for mood management, bad news starts arriving late. Phrases starts arriving late, or softened, or reframed, or pushed aside until the media forces it into view. And by then, the decision window may already be gone. That's the reality check this story demands. Look at the contradictions one by one. If the war is already won, why are major members of Congress still demanding the most basic answers about strategy, options, and troop posture? If the administration has a firm grip, why are even Republican lawmakers signaling discomfort after classified briefings? If the president is receiving the full picture, why does reporting suggest that key warnings either did not sink in or did not shape his public understanding? And if the White House is so confident in the information flow, why does the entire system keep looking like it is built around performance? Those are not small questions. They are the questions, and the international consequences are even bigger. When allies in the Gulf see that the president publicly framed their exposure to retaliation as something nobody could have predicted, that sends a message. Not a good one. It suggests either a failure of preparation or a failure of candor. Neither inspires trust. And trust is the core currency of coalition warfare. If allies believe Washington is improvising, they start hedging. Quietly at first, then openly. And when hedging starts, strategy gets weaker. Because in a regional war, you do not just need firepower. You need credibility. You need partners to believe you know what you are doing, where this is going, and how it ends. If they stop believing that, then every future move becomes harder, more expensive, and more politically isolated. And that isolation can hit at home too. Congress is not there just to clap on cue. It is a constitutional actor. It funds the war, oversees the war, questions the war, and when the administration briefs lawmakers in ways that leave even friendly Republicans frustrated, that is not just embarrassing. Embarrassing. That is a flashing warning light for the sustainability of the whole operation. Because support does not collapse all at once. It erodes. First, members say they need more details. Then they say the public story and private story do not match. Then they start drawing red lines. Then they start protecting themselves politically. And once that starts, the president's room to maneuver gets smaller. That is the power play underneath all of this. Who is gaining advantage here? Short-term, Trump still gains from the image of command. He gets the visuals. He gets the language of victory. He gets to stand in front of cameras and say he is in charge, he is strong, and the mission is succeeding. That matters politically, especially with a base that prizes force and decisiveness. But long-term, the advantage shifts away from him if the gap between image and reality keeps widening. Because the deeper advantage in war does not belong to the side with the best montage. It belongs to the side that can adapt faster to reality. And if your own information bubble makes adaptation harder, then your strength becomes brittle. That is what brittleness looks like in power. It looks impressive right up until impact, and this is where the human factor matters. Presidents are not just offices. They are personalities. They have habits, preferences, blind spots, and every White House eventually adapts to those traits. Staff learn what gets attention, what gets ignored, what causes irritation, what lands well. Over time, that can create a dangerous internal game where the bureaucracy stops asking, what must the president hear? And starts asking, who will keep the president engaged? That may be efficient politically. It is disastrous strategically. Because war punishes vanity, it punishes denial, and it punishes any leader who mistakes applause lines for situational awareness. So what happens next? A few things are likely. First, congressional pressure grows. Not because everyone suddenly becomes anti-war, but because lawmakers hate being surprised. And right now, the briefings do not appear to be giving them confidence. Second, allied anxiety grows. Gulf partners do not want to be treated like collateral chapters in someone else's show of force. If they think Washington is improvising, they will protect themselves accordingly. Third, public confidence can crack fast if the administration keeps declaring victory while new retaliation, new costs, or new troop movements keep emerging. The most dangerous political moment in any war is when the official story sounds finished, but the actual war clearly is not. And fourth, the president becomes more trapped by his own rhetoric. Because once you say, oh, we've won enough times, backing down starts to look like weakness. Escalation starts to feel easier than admitting the picture was incomplete. That is how information bubbles become war traps. Not overnight, but step by step. A missed warning here, an overconfident claim there, a flattering briefing, a frustrated Congress, an ally that starts to doubt, a president who believes the highlight reel more than the friction on the ground. And then suddenly, what looked like control was never control at all. It was choreography. And that may be the clearest way to understand this story. The White House appears to be operating in two worlds at once. One is the world of impact clips, triumphant language, and fast declarations of success. The other is the world of retaliatory strikes, nervous allies, murky objectives, congressional frustration, and unanswered questions. The first world is easier to sell. The second world is the one that decides outcomes. That is the real divide here. Not left versus right. Not media versus administration, reality versus packaging. And no matter how gifted a political operator may be, reality always wins in the end. That is why this story should bother people across the spectrum. You do not have to be anti-Trump to find this alarming. You do not have to oppose every military action to understand the risk. In fact, if you support strong American leadership, this should bother you even more. Because real strength is not being protected from bad news. Real strength is being able to hear it, absorb it, and act on it before events force your hand. That is leadership. Not being shown the best explosions, not being told the cleanest version. Not performing command. Commanding. And that is the final point. This was not just a strange media story about how one president likes to consume information. It was a window into how power may actually be functioning at the highest level during a live war. It suggested that the battle over perception is not happening only between the White House and the press. It may also be happening inside the White House itself. That is the part people should not miss. Because when a president's internal picture of war is built through curated success, and his public comments begin colliding with reported intelligence warnings, and even his own allies in Congress start signaling that they are not getting straight answers, then the issue is no longer optics. It is judgment, it is process, it is credibility, and in a war, those three things are everything. This was not just a moment. It was a signal that the information system around power may be narrowing instead of expanding. A signal that the people tasked with managing the war may also be managing the president. And a signal that the distance between what is shown and what is true may be getting dangerously wide. That distance is where mistakes happen. That distance is where wars spread. And that distance is where presidencies break. We are not just watching a conflict overseas. We may be watching a presidency drift deeper into its own reflection. And if that is what is happening, then the most dangerous battlefield right now may not be in the Middle East at all. It may be inside the information bubble of the commander-in-chief.